House majority was built on listening, hearing the concerns of the American people, then producing solutions that address America's most pressing needs. Our nation is at a crossroads, and we have a choice to make about the future of our country. We need new ideas to ensure that we meet the challenges before us. But the best ideas don't come from Washington. They come from the people. Today we've gathered job creators from across America. Darlene Miller of Permac Industries, a custom precision parts manufacturer in Minnesota. Eris Papadopoulos of Titan America, a building materials company in Virginia. Safra Katz of Oracle, the American multinational computer technology company. Jim Plant of Pathway Genomics, a DNA genotyping testing company in California. Danny O'Neill of The Roastery, a nationally renowned specialty coffee company. Belinda Schaefer, an energy entrepreneur from West Virginia. Carl Schramm of the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation, an organization dedicated to creating new firms. Ignacio Irabazo Jr. of Commerce Bank, and one of America's leading authorities on minority and small business banking. We've gathered together to talk about jobs. Welcome to the Forum on Job Creation. And now, please welcome our moderator, Chief Deputy Whip, Peter Roscoe.
So I'm walking in my West Suburban district in Chicago, and I'm in a manufacturing facility, and my district is chock full of first and second generation companies that started out as a little tool and die operation in somebody's garage, and a generation later is employing 200 people in the western suburbs. And I'm walking in Carroll Stream, which is a town in my district, with the entrepreneur that started the company. And I asked him the question, I said, how is it going since 2008 when the wheels came off the cart? And he said, well, Congressman, here's what we did. We had a real tough deal. We had to let some people go, but we did what we had to do. We've run a lean manufacturing operation, and now we're doing okay right now. And I'm walking the plant floor, and he points to this manufacturing line, and he says, the smart move is for me to put $750,000 into this production line, but I'm not going to do it. And of course I ask him why. He says, well, it's real simple. Washington tells me I'm rich, so my taxes might be going up. I'm energy intensive, even though I've run a lean manufacturing operation. I need energy, and if the Environmental Protection Agency does cap and trade by rule, then my energy costs are going up. He said, I never actually thought my health care costs were going down. Actually, I'm not a chump, he said, but I am amazed when they're going up 24% this year. And even though I don't have much involvement in the capital markets, I have customers who need to finance their operations. They've got to finance their purchases with me, and ultimately they're having a hard time finding credit. So, Congressman, I'm going to wait. What this conversation is about today is to make the waiting go away, to try and create an environment where that type of business decision gets a different signal from Washington, D.C., and it's a signal that says there's certainty, there's clarity, there's an opportunity to grow and to prosper. And I want to thank these job creators that have come in from different parts of the country, and we're being joined by Sandra and Danny, who are not present with us physically in the building, but are present with us in this conversation, because ultimately this is a conversation that is focused on removing obstacles to job creation. So let's have a conversation. Darlene, what I just articulated to you a minute ago about this job creator in my district, give us a 3x5 card version about your precision manufacturing operation, and does anything that I said or telling about this story, do you relate to that at all?
It resonates with me very well. We also have opportunity right now for a lot of growth. There is just tons of opportunity out there, but it is that feeling of uncertainty whether you want to invest. Our equipment is $250,000 to $1.5 million, and so that's a lot of money, and we only get to depreciate it over, with the current Section 179, over 2 years. It takes 5 to 7 years, so that's a huge difference for us. And our skilled labor is really difficult to find, and we need programs that can help us get people off of unemployment and into our plants. Our jobs pay very well. Average $60,000, $80,000 is not unusual, so it's a good salary for a rewarding position. So we experience exactly the same as what you're talking about, and you know, we need to stop being stymied by regulation and not being able to receive capital and be able to move on and grow and hire more people.
Speaker Boehner, your journey was from business to public service. What is it about your business experience and your business background that you're trying to replicate in terms of leadership within the House to create a different environment here?
Well, you know, when you create jobs and you meet a payroll and you deal with all of the rules and regulations at the federal level, the state level, and the local level, you begin to understand that there's a lot of risk. Now, when you're putting capital in place, which is a generic term that those of us in the private sector use, it's not generic, though. If you're going to buy that piece of equipment and you're going to plop down $500,000 or $1 million, you've got to be able to know that it's going to be used, the utilization is going to be such that you can afford to make that investment. But when you don't know what new rules and regulations are coming out of Washington, you don't know what the tax rates may or may not be, it creates uncertainty. And that uncertainty causes people in America to sit on their hands. I've had this conversation with the President a half a dozen times over the last 2 years. And I don't think that they quite understand the realities of the private sector. So I'm glad that Mr. Cantor and Mr. Roskin and Mr. Henschling and Mr. McCarthy and all of my colleagues are having this event today so that we can better understand the obstacles that are in the way of creating jobs in America.
Safra Katz, you're joining us from California, and as somebody who probably represents the largest employer here in this conversation today, as you're looking out over the landscape trying to make decisions on a global basis for U.S. job creation and prosperity, what are the obstacles, if any, that you see now, and how can Congress send a different signal? How can we help you create an environment where you can make decisions to create jobs in the U.S.?
Well, the first thing is to not put companies that are big exporters and big global companies at a disadvantage against our foreign competitors. And as I've mentioned before, the U.S. tax policy on corporations actually encourages us to leave our export earnings abroad right now and invest in capital overseas. And I think, you know, the most important thing we could do to get this economy started, at least from our point of view here in the Valley, is to bring a lot of that trapped capital back into the United States so that we're not building and hiring overseas, but we're building here and hiring here. And all, you know, my biggest foreign competitor, the German company, their country actually encourages export, but once it taxes just the income that is earned in Germany, and the taxes are paid all over the world, and then those companies are allowed to bring that money back into Germany to invest in Germany. I think at the very least we should encourage American companies to export globally and bring the money home.
Leader Cantor, based on what Safra just said, in terms of a global competitiveness agenda, how do you respond to that from somebody that's overseeing and making decisions about what markets to go into, where the opportunities are? How is it that we try and create an environment that it makes it easier for her to make decisions here in the U.S. to keep jobs and prosperity here?
What Safra just said is that right now, America is not the most competitive place to place your company. America may not be the most competitive place from a tax standpoint to invest your capital. We've got to really adopt a new mentality I mean, that's why we're here today with these job creators and welcome those who are here via video. And we are here to say, look, we're going to listen. We don't believe that you can wave a magic wand here in Washington and find a way to spend taxpayer dollars and create jobs. We believe that you rely on the folks that are here with us today and the likes of these folks across the country to say, we're going to take a risk. We're going to bet on America. And we're about trying to say that listen to say, how can we best position America as the destination for investment capital? That's how we'll see jobs again. So Safra points out the tax policies. We've got a regulatory environment right now that I think folks who are thinking globally, as well as small business people here in our country, are thinking twice about whether they really have a fair shot at that return they're looking for once they sign the note at the bank or take on more debt on their credit card to open a business. So that's what we're about trying to accomplish here so we can best position our country to be the destination for entrepreneurs.
Ignacio, as a banker, what do you think about what the leader just said in terms of banking and credit opportunities? What kind of pressures are you under right now from a regulatory point of view? What kind of environment you're operating in? And take us to the next step. What can it be like if there's a different environment that's more positive? And what are those obstacles?
Well, first of all, I've been in banking now for over 40 years, and I've never seen the regulatory issue as bad as it is today. I mean, we have all kinds of examinations now coming on to the bank, whether it's safety and soundness, compliance examinations, CRA examinations. The examiners are coming in more frequently. They're kind of staying in longer, and that has really put a burden on us over the past couple of years. We find it, I have now spent more of my time in compliance and regulatory issues than in what I really like to do, which is lend and create jobs and create capital and create opportunities for people of all kinds. And I don't spend my time anymore. I'm more concerned about the examinations. They're coming on and on. I wish that would not be the case, but it is. And I don't know when it's going to stop, but certainly it's becoming more prevalent the past 2 years at least.
Kevin McCarthy, you had a journey here that was unique in terms of entrepreneurship that started as a teenager. What is it from your personal experience, and give us a little glimpse of that journey, and how are you trying to create an environment where entrepreneurship is possible again?
Thank you, Peter. My journey is a little different. My journey is coming out of high school, not getting a scholarship, parents not having the money to send you to college, so you had to become an entrepreneur to take your way there. Banks not having the capital to be able to lend. Fortunate enough to win the lottery on the second day, but it's $5,000. Put that into the stock market, took a risk, but then I went out and created a small business, and lo and behold, I found the regulations hold me back, but when I became that entrepreneur, I didn't take a job, I created jobs. And that's where jobs get created. At the end of 2 years, I had enough money to pay my way through college, able to take the risk. It's what Safra's talking about, it's what everybody's talking about. If you want to look for job creation, we need to have a country that thinks about creating jobs, not government. And when you think from one perspective, I happen to come from California. So the one thing I only hear about is how other states are taking jobs from California because they're making it more attractive. We have to think as a nation that we compete with other countries. And that's the mindset we have to come to, that we are one country, but we are a country that's competing everywhere else. And why do we create these disadvantages? You want to know what would unite this country? That as a whole, we unite every time we have an Olympics, and we never care about whether that person's a Republican, a Democrat, or a Green Party. We just want America to do the best. Thank you for the back of the room. But what I would say, as we listen here today, that's what we're going about. How do we knock down these obstacles? And if you could imagine for one moment, imagine how prosperous Americans could be if the burden of debt was gone, the shackles were undone for regulations, and we could actually rise to the potential that we know the country has and should be. That's what the challenge today is about.
Jim Plant, you're speaking of California. You are a job creator. You're an entrepreneur. You had an interesting idea. Tell this group about your idea and how the federal government interacted with that, whether it was a net plus to boost you up and to encourage you, or whether what the real story was.
Great, yeah. Well, Pathway Genomics is a genetic testing company and is part of this whole emerging new technology of genetics, where we can tell people about their disease risks of certain diseases, and they can take steps to prevent those diseases, and also give them some indications of the best types of medications they should or shouldn't take. And our industry is at the point that the internet industry was more than 10 years ago. And if we're not burdened by additional regulations, we think our industry can contribute to the economy in the same way that the internet has.
Now that's easy to relate to. I mean, in terms of people understand where the internet was 10 years ago and where it is today. There's no aspect of our lives that hasn't been impacted by the internet. What you're saying is that the technology that you're a part of, essentially, has the ability to unleash sort of secrets and insight into healthcare that can be transformational.
Yeah, that's right, and to reduce healthcare costs and also to create lots of jobs. Our company is a source of high-paying, clean jobs, as our whole industry is. And what we're faced with right now is we have the opportunity to do a lot of business in the U.S., and you know, we're getting lots of suggestions from the regulators that they want to impose new regulations. Okay, and so a lot of those deals are on hold. Okay, and we have to go and find customers overseas, and we're just not creating. We could have created another 100 jobs last year if the regulators hadn't suggested that they wanted to impose new regulations. And imposing new regulations will actually increase the costs of these types of tests.
Rather than the federal government coming alongside you saying, look, how can we help you deliver a safe product and so forth in the marketplace, you got blindsided.
Yeah, I mean, basically the industry is being attacked at this point.
Belinda from West Virginia, involved in mining and construction. What's your story been insofar as how has the government come alongside you to either help or to hinder you?
Well, I would go along with him saying our industry is definitely being attacked. Ours is being attacked by EPA, OSM. They've come at us through the Clean Water Act. They've taken a permit that we should have been able to expand and mine 25,000 tons a month on. We've been lucky to get 10,000 tons a month out of it because of the way they've made across things and put streams in. And I think for us, the certainty is a huge thing. When I go to banks now and talk to banks, you know, he can't know tomorrow if my permit is going to be good. Even though I have a permit today, tomorrow they can revoke it.
So in other words, the government comes out and says, here's a permit. They check all the boxes, you're fine.
Exactly right. And you're allowed to start mining. But then in a matter of, and it could be anywhere from a month to 3 years as we've seen, okay, well, you know what, we've changed our mind. That permit, no, we don't want to do that now, so we're going to pull that. All right, well, when I'm looking at capital, and for us, I'm in the same situation that Darlene is. Our equipment can be $1 million+. If I go and ask you for a loan, and you look at that and you go, well, okay, I'm going to finance that over 5 years, but how do we know your permit's going to be there? We had 5 permits in the West Virginia DEP. We had to cut all of them except one. We now have chosen one that the EPA has said that if there was ever a permit they wanted to approve, it is one like this. We're waiting to see.
Wow.
So you don't know if you're going to get the permit. I can sell all the coal that we can mine, and it goes to Power Coal in Harrison and Albright in West Virginia. We supply West Virginia with West Virginia coal for West Virginia Power. It's all steam coal. The banks have always worked well with me until this came and this happened, and now there's no certainty. They can't let us borrow anything because as a small coal operator, they don't know if I'm going to have the ability to pay that back. I signed contracts with First Energy to buy all of our coal. Well, I pray and hope that we can continue to supply that because, again, the EPA or OSM can come in and go, no, we've changed our minds. There is zero certainty, and they're stepping over where they were made through the Clean Water Act and the OSM rules to partner with the state of West Virginia. They have now come in and said, you know what, we don't like anything you're doing. We're going to take your state primacy away, and we're going to roll it.
They're sharp elbowing. the state level.
They have put the DEP, and it's not that the DEP hasn't done anything. The DEP has done their job. They've done it well. Do I see eye to eye with our West Virginia DEP? No, I don't all the time. But that's what they were created to come in and partner with them, not to step over and say, no, state primacy, you have none of that anymore, the federal government.
Well, and here's the irony. I mean, just looking at today's headlines with all the turmoil in the Middle East, with a great deal of calamity and devastation in Japan, with increasing pressure now on worldwide energy production, here we've got a resource, an American energy resource, creating opportunity to create American jobs, and you're getting nickeled and dimed by the very people that are supposed to come alongside.
Oh, we're getting killed.
Yeah, I understand. All right, Eris, who is in the cement business, give us a sense of how important is cement. Here's sort of the straight up question. How important is cement? Very important. How does it relate to what's happening globally, and where are the cross pressures right now in your industry?
Well, I'd like to say, because a lot of people confuse cement with concrete, that cement's to concrete what nails are to wood. And we're basically the driving force of the $1 trillion+ construction industry, which is one of the biggest employers of ordinary Americans trying to earn a good salary, small business, a lot of small business, and a lot of minorities. And it's been the hardest hit industry in this country. And unfortunately, you know, we faced a huge barrage of additional regulation, which in our industry is a tax. Our own industry, from just one out of a half a dozen new regulations, is having, at a time when our profits have been wiped out, being asked to invest $5.5 billion to meet rules that we don't think will do anything even for the environment. The competition from international is real. It costs twice as much because of a lot of these regulations to build capacity in the U.S. So where are future investments going to go? They're going to go overseas. And the U.S. is going to end up importing a lot of this cement down the road. Today, imports are about 10%. They could be over 50%. I mean, that could have a huge impact on infrastructure.
In a very short period of time,
in a
right?
short period of time.
You're talking a few years.
So, you know, we're doing damage to ourselves. I wish we would look at countries resilient like Germany, who have a win-win approach to working with industry. Wish we could sit down with the regulators and say, this is what we can do. You know, this is how we can continuously improve, and our industry has invested tens of billions in the last 15 years making continuous improvements. But we lost that sense of win-win. We need to get it back somehow. We need to get back the sense of fairness, that when permits are issued, they're issued and people bank on them, people invest their dollars, investors invest money behind those permits. You can't just change them, you know, in a year or two. This is a basic sense of American justice and fairness that we need to get back into our system.
Chairman Henserling, serving on the Financial Services Committee, sitting next to a banker, hearing some of these difficulties as it relates to certainty and predictability. How does this relate to what you're hearing with your constituents in Texas?
I've lost count of how many times we've heard the phrase lack of certainty or uncertainty in the short time that we have been on this stage. I know that you can't have the benefits of capitalism without capital. And it speaks volumes to me when a respected financial institution in the state of Texas is telling us they've got capital that they want to get out, that they want to lend to entrepreneurs, to small businesses, and instead it's being eaten up by the regulatory burden, which of course is a tax. And we know whatever you tax, you get less of. And clearly there's a very important role for safety and soundness regulation within our financial institutions, our banking system. But Ignacio, I would be very curious to know, from your years of banking, I think you said roughly a quarter of a century, how much of the regulatory burden has nothing to do with the safety and soundness of our financial institutions?
Well, just to give an example, we probably spend over $5 million on different departments, different personnel, just to take care of safety and soundness. And that's a tremendous burden on us, and it's certainly the unpredictability. What is really happening is that the examiners come in and they second guess a particular loan or a particular situation. And they're driven not by the common sense sometimes of the examiner that's on the field with us that we've known for years, but sometimes it's driven by Washington. They have to to send all the reports over here for approval, whether it's Dallas or in Washington. And over here is driven by numbers. So they have no idea who that person is, who that particular situation is. And we don't have that discretion, and certainly the examiner and the field does not have the discretion. So all of a sudden, you know, we are not in a position to open the gates up anywhere because we're already burdened with that loan classification list that we might have. And we don't want to get outside those particular parameters that they give us, so we can't move. We just have to stop and wait till this particular recession is over and then go on. But what's really killing the economy is that money, as you well said, the capital that creates jobs, that creates, you know, more well-being for our customers is not being lent out because we're holding back until see what Washington and what Dallas are going to be saying on our particular loans and our particular reviews. And that goes across the spectrum of CRA and compliance. And the worst thing about all this is there's no review of what is being done. It stops at the FDIC, it stops at the Fed. And what's really problematic to us is that Washington or Congress makes the laws, the courts, you know, review it, but all the guidances and all the regulations are really being made by the regulators, not by Congress. I think it's terrible.
There's a very important point that you make as far as this regulatory burden. Again, keeping capital on the sideline. I've seen where the Federal Reserve says that banks are sitting on about $1 trillion of excess reserves that could go and capitalize small businesses and entrepreneurs, but it's not getting out there.
No.
And again, you say we're holding back. And so, Peter, what I hear in the 5th District of Texas that represents East Dallas, suburban Southeast Dallas County, a lot of rural areas in East Texas, so it's small business, it's large business, everything in between. It's the uncertainty about this regulatory burden. It's the uncertainty about taxes. Now, we've seen a slight uptick in the economy, but I think it's one of the reasons is because a number of people on this stage in Congress helped forestall the largest tax increase in American history, but that's only for 2 years. And so I'm not sure how many enterprises are going to get launched on a 2-year horizon for tax planning. And Ignacio, you make a very good point that although we're elected officials, several of us on this stage, a lot of the power has been transferred from elected officials to unelected bureaucrats. And too often people are measuring the purported benefits of a regulation versus the actual benefits of a regulation and the cost on lack of jobs. And so we have to have a completely different approach. I mean, it's almost like you could sell a videotape of bureaucrats gone wild. I mean, when I wake up and find out the EPA now wants to tell dairy farmers they have to have emergency spill plans like petroleum companies. I mean, I heard one farmer, one of my colleagues said, one of their dairy farmers said, you know, I've got an emergency plan if we have spilt milk. The emergency plan is this. Here, kitty, 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 kitty. You know, we laugh about it, but that's a burden on dairy farmers. I have dairy farmers in East Texas. You know, they're going to now spend money on an emergency plan that's laughable that they could have spent expanding dairy farms and jobs.
All right, Carl, you've spent a career in and out around entrepreneurs. You've created companies. You now work for a foundation that studies and highlights entrepreneurship. What are you hearing this morning that are consistent themes that can begin to transform? In other words, that we can create an environment where entrepreneurship is admired and supported and encouraged.
Well, I'd start by talking about Mr. Kaufman, who was a great American. He grew up in the Depression. He was poor. He became a billionaire because he created Marion Laboratories. When he died in 1993, his gift to the United States was his insight that what transformed his life was he got to be an entrepreneur. And he created a foundation, a nonpartisan foundation, to help assist people to understand that. And you know, when Representative McCarthy spoke his told his story, he almost quoted Mr. Kaufman, who said to anybody who would listen, make a job, don't take a job. And his vision was all these new businesses would be particularly helpful with people coming out of poverty. So our foundation has invested millions of dollars in research and just understanding firm formation and job creation. And I think if there's one thing I hear through here, there's a consistent theme, it is job creation. And it's consistent with what all of our data tell us. And the Kauffman Foundation has been doing lots and lots of research. We're the largest private funder of economic research in the nation. And the single most important data is that all new firms, all new net job creation in the United States comes from firms less than 5 years old. And it's new firms. It's not necessarily small businesses. So it seems to me that the target of policy has to be any which way in terms of certainty and regulations, all the things that these business people know much better than I do. It has to be around the question of how do you accelerate new firm formation, because with that, we will in fact see a reduction in the unemployment rate.
Safra, I'm coming to you next, but at first I want to ask Leader Cantor about this notion of bureaucrats gone wild. I mean, it's a great line, but you can actually sort of imagine that. We've heard Belinda talk about that. We've heard others talk about that. We've heard Jim talk about that. Can you describe for us the REINS Act, what it is Congressman Jeff Davis is trying to do, and how that relates to a sense of accountability for bureaucracies and pulling that back so that it's reasonable and rational and not arbitrary and capricious?
Sure, and the REINS Act is very simple in its intent. It's to try and stop the impacts, the negative impacts of regulation that we've heard here this morning. And it is basically to say that any regulation of significant impact should be approved by those accountable to the people, which is Congress. Otherwise, we ought not have a bureaucracy run amok. And again, for exactly the reason that Carl talked about, you know, if we're going to be that country where startups happen, where businesses flourish, where we can see job growth, you've got to take away the disincentive for people to step up and take a risk. And it goes back to what Safra says. You know, Safra, as head of an American-based multinational, wants a fair shot to compete against her foreign competitors. Just like the small businesses we have here today, you know, they want a fair shot to ensure the government's not going to alter the rules, change them in the middle of the game, and got a fair shot at making a return. Because along with that return comes jobs. Along with those jobs comes a quality of life for the people of this country. That's what we got to get back to. That's what the REINS Act is about.
Safra. Safra, I see you clapping at your desk there. So if there were more predictability, if there were more certainty, how does that drive decisions at a very senior executive level, at a global level, as you're looking out over the landscape of thinking competitively, the pressures that are on you to create profits and to add value to shareholders and so forth? What does predictability from a bureaucratic point of view mean? And can you also walk us through some of the tax decisions that you have to make in terms of bringing capital back and deploying it to its highest and best use here in the U.S.?
Well, you know, for us, we make these enormous capital decisions globally all the time. And as everyone knows from Econ 101, capital's going to go where it gives you the best return. That's our job for our shareholders. It's not our money. It's our shareholders' money. And ultimately, what we see is that, you know, what's gone on in the United States are the two things we've been talking about. First, regulations that are meant for one thing in reaction to one thing end up having implications in other places. And then what's also happened is that other countries have realized that it's a competitive world, and our rates didn't end up the highest because they started that way. But everybody else, even France, lowered their tax rates. And so in an effort to try to compete for capital, for jobs, for infrastructure, and for us, what we have to do is we have to decide where we have the best return. I can assure you, we're not in Ireland because of the weather. I'd love to have more of our money here. And, you know, at this point, we have, you know, very little of our actual cash here where we can truly invest it. without taking a massive, massive reduction in it. So when we plan globally, we need to know that things aren't going to constantly undermine our efforts, whether it's regulation, and we're not even a regulated company. There's no Federal Software Commission, and yet things like Sarbanes-Oxley, which were meant to stop fraud and, were actually a reaction to fraud, which violated old laws, has an impact on big companies like me. Let's say I can afford it. I can only imagine the impact it has on small companies when they're making their decisions.
Do you think, Safra, could you comment further, if there were, what would it be like for you in your boardroom making a decision about where to, put a plant or where to do a distribution facility and so forth if the U.S. corporate tax rate were lower? Is that an invitation? Am I overstating that, or is that as big of an impact as I think it is?
No, it's a huge deal, because remember, when we bring our money back, we would have to take a massive haircut for it. At a significantly lower rate, we would bring it in, it would be here, and instead of building what I believe to be the tallest skyscraper in Bucharest, Romania, we would have a plant, an additional facility here. So for us, these issues have massive impact on us. If we could both simplify the rules and actually make the United States actually competitive with the rest of the world, you would actually see some investment, some additional investment, a lot less cash sitting overseas.
Let me shift gears for a minute, because what I'd like to do is just to focus the conversation, because this will end up being the fastest hour online. I want to focus now on the positive. Where can we, to follow up on Kevin McCarthy's statement about imagining what this could be like, what are the obstacles? Jim, I'm going to start with you, and we're going to bounce around a little bit. What are the obstacles that if Washington, through policy changes, removed an obstacle, what could it be like? What would be the impact on your decision making as a person in California who's making decisions about where to invest, where to go, highly entrepreneurial, you've got a lot of flexibility in where to go. What obstacles can we remove here, and what would that mean if the obstacle were removed?
Right, so with our industry, the FDA has been suggesting they want to add additional regulations. So we think the current regulations are sufficient and allow our tests to be done at a very high accuracy, which is, and that type of testing has been done through the laboratory licensing process for many years, and it works very well. But by the mere suggestion that the FDA is going to create new regulations, it's stifling the industry. In our example, we could have created 100 new jobs last year based on a deal that we had that we could no longer pursue.
Are these nickel and dime jobs?
No, the average wage of employee at our company is $82,000. These are scientists and highly trained technicians, and these are clean jobs. It's a new type of job that can really contribute to the U.S. job growth.
So it is as straightforward as if there was a predictable rule that were coming out from the FDA, if the FDA was in fact up to speed on what was going on, and you had a sense of predictability, and the mission was actually soundness and safety as it relates to the public health, then there'd be 100 new people employed. Is that
no
right?
question. We'd have 100 more people making $82,000 a year in our company right now. And the thing is, the best thing is for just to leave things as it is and not suggest that there would even be new regulations.
Right.
Because adding additional regulations...
It's the sword of Damocles.
That's right. The threat is causing us harm, but even if they add new regulations and there is clarity, our costs are still going to go up.
Right.
And the cost of health care will go up in this particular area.
Ignacio, you've described this kind of cascading morass of regulations that you're dealing with. You've got FDIC, you've got the Federal Reserve, you've got the state of Texas, you've got everybody, internal, external, all kinds of auditors. What are the obstacles? And look, there's nobody, including you, that's arguing for a risky financial environment. As Chairman Henserling mentioned a couple of minutes ago, safety and soundness is where we want to be. But it's reached a point in some of these institutions of just absurdity. What could we do to remove obstacles so that you have more flexibility? And what would you naturally do with that more flexibility? What would it mean?
Well, you have an hour, a couple of hours, I'll discuss some of that. But I think what some of the issues are that we can eliminate quickly is, first of all, the Darwin Amendment. That's basically price controls. No question about that. How can they come and dictate to us how much we can charge on an interchange fee when we know that if we start charging 12 cents per transaction and the cost just to the Visa interchange people is 13 cents, with no consideration for our costs, what is that going to do? So we got to eliminate that. The second thing we got to eliminate is some of those things that they let the market dictate prices and on some of our services. You know, right now, the FDIC is dictating or have some controls on the overdraft costs and the overdraft fees that we can charge. They're going to control that completely. The other thing they possibly could do is some accountability for some of these federal agencies. There is no accountability. They do whatever they want to, and there's nobody else that can, there's no appeal court. As I said before, you know, the Congress makes the laws, so the judges interpret them, but really, down here in the trenches, the laws are being made by the regulators, period. And then the fourth thing I could quickly suggest is some streamline of some of this regulatory burden that we have. Like I said, we have tons of regulatory issues that we have to contend with, and that takes not only expenses and money, but also takes capital away and the time that it requires for us to doing what we do best, and that's making loans and creating capital and creating jobs.
Okay, Danny O'Neill from the Roastery. I wasn't ignoring you. I was told the audio was bad. Are you there? Is it working? That's why I was ignoring you. No, can you hear me? Nope. Okay. We love you, but we're going to move on. So,
yeah, I can hear you now.
You can? Okay, great. Danny, so, okay, you've got all this pent-up energy. You've been listening to this for 45 minutes, and you've been tapping your fingers, saying, I got things to say. How does this conversation relate to you, a guy that's an entrepreneur that came up with a coffee business based on being a foreign exchange student? And what do you have to say in response to these types of things that you've heard this morning?
Yeah, I agree with much of what has been said, and I started my company the day Ewing Kauffman, or the year Ewing Kauffman died, and so I would say first and foremost uncertainty. And how that relates to me, or how I think about that, is like a football game. For me, business is a lot like a football game. I have this notion of just give me the ball, coach, just give me the ball. So I like my chances with the ball, and then I say just give me the play, or let me call my own play. So getting out there, preparing for a game, and knowing the rules, I'm all in. I love that idea. And then changing the rules at the last minute. That's what drives all of us crazy. And so that's first and foremost. So as it relates to insurance, as it relates to health care, all that, all of us want to look after our folks. But as somebody said earlier, what most of us want is just a level playing field. And then somebody who imports coffee, I mean, that's probably 95% of our business. All the notion of regulating imports or bashing imports, wow, that scares the bejesus out of me. So we don't have enough coffee, obviously, to support what we do. So that whole deal with regulating imports or tariffs, all that really scares our industry.
Belinda, let me go to you. What are the obstacles that, if they were removed, would help you in your mining operation? And I know that you're not suggesting that there shouldn't be any regulation and so forth, but what are the hassles you're dealing with that are not adding any value in terms of environmental protection and just good common sense.
Okay, I think a lot of what you've heard up here, where I am in total agreement with, the regulators are coming in and they're making their own rules. It's really not you guys right now that are so-called hindering us as much. It's they've come through directive order, and they're going out there and they're changing the minds that they've had that set for years. So I think what could really help us, and what I'm really wanting to see you all do, is step in where the EPA is concerned, step in where OSM, remind them of why they were created. They are there to partner with the state of West Virginia. They are not there to run the state of West Virginia. I think the saddest thing that you can hear in America, and I don't know how many times over the past year I've said it, even crying at times, and that is you want so much to do everything right within your company. I'm not asking to hurt the environment. I'm not asking for unsafe conditions. I'm asking to give us the chance to do what we do, and we do it probably, we've got one of the safest minds, one of the best group of employees I've ever seen. I could grow that from 24 employees to probably 100 employees within 2 to 3 years if we can get this to know that I have those permits, I can get those permits, the DEP is there to set those rules, and EPA and OSM are going to partner with them.
Say that again. You could grow from
I'm
what?
24 to probably 100 employees if I have those 5 permits that I can get done, okay? But I need the EPA and the OSM to be reminded that they are to partner with the state of West Virginia. They are to go along beside them. They are not to override them. They are not to come in and say, no, we're going to run the show. And they did it not with your approval. They did it through executive order. They came in and did it on their own. So imagine in America you have your own company, and I've been doing this since I was 17 years old. You have your own company, and you've done everything right. You've won awards for the way you've taken care of the environment. You've been voted as one of the best small businesses in the state of West Virginia. Our people are paid anywhere from $18 to $25 an hour, 100% of their health insurance, not just on them, but on their employees as well. You know, paid vacation. Actually, we're a company that if our employees are having a tough time, they can come to us and we will give them money to help them along, to help their families along, because we are very family-oriented. And I've done all of that, and guess who put me out of a job? The federal government did. The American dream was killed by what the federal government did. Now, how right is that? To stand in America, have your own company, do what is right, and the federal government can kill you because they want to? Without rules. There's got to be certainty, and they've got to be reminded of their place.
Eris, so you're trying to compete in a worldwide marketplace. You're trying to manufacture and produce in Virginia, here in the U.S., obviously. And you hear that there's a rule that may be promulgated that's going to put pressure on you to close, or to have plants closed here in the U.S. Could you highlight what we're dealing with, particularly vis-a-vis Germany? You mentioned Europe at some point in the conversation. And so what you're saying is we're not competing with China here. We're actually competing with European partners with Europe that has done a better job of figuring this out than the U.S. Is that right?
Well, we're competing in a global market that includes Asia, South America, Europe, Africa. But our role models should not be China in terms of the standards we apply to our industry. I mean, we have world-class industry here in the U.S., I think in our sector, in our plants, and in other sectors. We should be proud of that, and we should role model after other Western countries. Somehow we've lost touch with reality. I mean, a lot of what we're seeing from regulations is coming out of these very complex, that nobody understands computer models that the EPA uses as justification. And when we tell them, come out to our communities, come out to our locations, talk to our neighbors, see the history, because we've been in certain locations for half a century. We have not harmed anyone. They ignore that. So we've lost touch with reality, and that's going to hurt us. They treat us like we're utilities. Utilities can't move anywhere else. They have to produce power here in the U.S. They can't offshore. Utilities can get a rate of return through the rate-setting process. So the model they're applying to industry, products industry, is the same model they're applying to utilities. It doesn't work. I mean, they have no sense of how real business works.
Darlene, you're manufacturing actually to the right of a decimal. I mean, it's incredibly sophisticated manufacturing. I've been through plants in my district that are, I think, your equivalent, cleaner than most kitchens. It's incredibly dynamic, very, very high tech. What are the obstacles that this Congress can remove, or this administration could remove if it had a change of heart and wanted to create jobs? What are the obstacles that could be removed that would help you make decisions where you're not just making more money, which is a good thing to be profitable, but where it would actually prompt you to bring more people in and hire more people?
Well, I think it's the same theme. The regulatory is just immense, and it's not even knowing what's coming down the pipe. We don't have people to research what's going on. The practicality of regulation is gone. It's a conception of what should be when it's not reality, and it takes away from our jobs. And they're not asking us what's important. We as entrepreneurs want the safety of our employees more than anything in the safe and good environment. We're not going to do things that are stupid to hurt those. So ask us those questions. Ask what job it's going to take. The other thing, though, is we really need to know on the tax code what's going to happen, because we're reinvesting for the future. And if I'm going to pay a lot more taxes, I can't afford to buy that equipment that I'm going to have to pay off over 5 to 7 years. I can't afford to hire skilled workers. We need programs that would help us hire people that are unemployed, to get those skilled workers, to train the untrained. You know, maybe there could be some kind of credits like the Section 179 for training that would, you know, help us get there. And it'd be a win-win for everybody, for the government, for the people, for me, for all of us. So there's just, you know, healthcare, regulation something has to change. Our rates have been going up too. 16, 20% every year. Something has to happen there, but I don't think what's happened is the right thing. We need to get rid of the frivolous lawsuits. We need to be able to cross state lines, do group insurance, you know, some positive things. And I don't see where these, the new policy is going to help us at all. I think our rates are going to continue. So that they need to listen to us. And really help us do what we do best, which is reinvest and bring on new equipment, new people, and manufacture in America.
Well, Darlene, you're our closer. I think you said it really well, and you brought it home and articulated it in such a way that it's very easy to relate to. And I'm just going to ask Speaker Boehner, based on what you've heard, Mr. Speaker, as this Congress, this 112th Congress, is now empaneled and empowered to try and move an agenda. How does this relate to your vision? How does this relate to where this Congress needs to move?
You know, the American people are still asking the question, where are the jobs? And as we listened to those who participated today, it's pretty clear that part of the reason they're still asking that question is that government is in the way of job creators in America. And as someone who understands what uncertainty does to small employers, obviously, more regulations, higher taxes creates more uncertainty. When you look at our efforts as the new majority here in the Congress, our number one goal is to create an environment, assisting creating an environment where employers can begin to hire again. And what do we need to do in order to do that? I think we need to stop the spending binge here in Washington. When people look at the amount of debt that's being built up, they see the fact that 40 cents on every dollar the federal government spends this year, we have to borrow from our kids and grandkids. It creates uncertainty. So we have to stop the spending binge. We've heard an awful lot about regulations today. I think it's time for Congress to do its constitutionally mandated duty to hold agencies accountable for what they do and they don't do. And as part of that, we probably ought to take a real serious look at how regulators regulate. We have the most adversarial regulatory system in the United States than almost anywhere in the world. If you look at how the Germans do it and some others, it's a collaborative process. We all want clean water. Yes. We all want clean air. We want to take care of our employees, but it's an adversarial relationship that just gets heated up, and we need to look at what that relationship really ought to look like. Thirdly, we got 3 free trade agreements that we're hoping the President will send here. More trade will create more jobs here in America. And lastly, I do think that we need to look at our tax system. When you look at what's going on with the corporate tax rate, we've got several trillion dollars sitting overseas that could come back to America and be invested here. But it won't be because of the way we tax corporate America. I think it's high time that we make changes to do all of these things.
Leader Cantor, as the person that's interacting with the committee chairman and driving the floor debate and so forth, how did this conversation animate or highlight your commitment to job creation here in the U.S.?
Well, I think Darlene, in her closing comments, probably said it best, that the regulators are not listening to us. And that somehow, as Safra indicated, there may have been a regulation with a well-meaning intent, but somehow the unintended consequences ended up causing a lot of problems for others. And so somehow I think we've got to knock some sense back into the process of regulation. Our committees are hard at work now trying to ask the right questions of the regulators to insist upon a reasoned analysis if you're going to put burdens on the people we're relying upon to create jobs. And this shouldn't, as the Speaker said, should not be adversarial. This should be something we are cooperative and working together with the single goal of trying to create and return prosperity. And I think to sum it all up, it seems like to me we've got to get back to the American notion that if you are going to commit yourself to success, if you are going to decide to work hard every day and play by the rules, you ought to be able to get ahead. And that's, I think, Peter, where we are. And I know that there's some press here, and I think at this point, if okay, that we'll take a few questions from the press.
Thank you. Question for the Speaker. Negotiations over a continuing resolution for the rest of the year seem to be getting more fractious. More and more members are voting against these resolutions. How are you going to unite?
We didn't like your question.
Whoa.
That was my answer.
That's good.
So we're in conversations with the White House and with the Senate, trying to finish the work that should have been done last year. And we would like to come to an agreement as soon as possible.
Jill?
Let's try this again. On a somewhat related, you might argue, level, the president is standing by the need to expand nuclear energy in this country. And I am curious for your reaction to that, and whether you think it's actually, in light of what's happening in Japan, a time to maybe stop, take a deep breath, and have a review of the nuclear reactors already existing in this country and whether they have the safety standards needed to avoid the situation that's happening there.
Well, I don't think there's any question that there are a lot of lessons to be learned by what's happening in Japan. And there's no question we will learn from that. But there are nuclear reactors operating all over the world. 82% of the electricity produced in France comes from nuclear sources and have done so successfully for decades. Only 20% of the electric in the United States come from nuclear sources. So I think let's learn the lessons. Let's understand what safeguards, if any, additional safeguards need to be put in place. But let's not just say, like we have for the last 30 years, we're not even going to look at it because we're afraid of it.
Feels like we're at the White House right now, Mr. Speaker. But
I don't feel like I'm at the White House.
54 Republican members of your conference voted against the short-term CR yesterday. Essentially, you needed Democratic support to get it over the line. Do you think that that makes these next 2 or 3 weeks all the more important in terms of getting a long-term CR? And do you see, if another vote comes about, you being able to deliver with your conference another temporary budget?
Well, I'm pleased that we were able to pass the the 3-week CR, cutting $6 billion in additional spending. That's $10 billion in spending that was cut over the last several weeks. When was the last time you saw the government here in Washington cut anything? And so I'm pleased that the Congress voted to cut spending. As I said, I'm interested in getting the continuing resolution for the balance of this fiscal year in place. It's not going to be easy. We never thought it was going to be easy. But I remember I saw this picture of this sign that used to hang in a former speaker's office. And that sign said, listen, learn, help, and lead. I'm all about it.
Teeing off Luke's question, Democrats are happy to point out now that you needed Democratic help to pass a 3-week CR. Do they have a point then that the path forward to passing a 7-month or 6-month CR requires negotiating in concert with a big chunk of the Democratic caucus? Or is it more incumbent upon you to see what your own caucus wants to do first?
Well, let me remind you that Republicans control 1/2 of 1/3 of our government. It's never been lost on me that because we only control the House, there are a lot of other players that we need to work with in order to come to any agreement to keep the government open. But I'm confident that we'll be able to find a way to cut spending, which we believe will lead to a better environment for businesses to hire people in America and keep the government open.
Mr. Speaker, there was a poll earlier this week in the Washington Post that suggested that the public isn't buying the Republicans' argument that cutting government spending will result in job creation. Are you concerned that this political message isn't getting through and that perhaps the House Republicans are just as out of touch with the thinking of Americans as the Democrats, as you say the Democrats were when they were when the public was clearly divided over health care?
Listen, a month ago, I gave the president a letter signed by 150 economists who said that cutting spending here in Washington would lead to a better environment for job creators to create jobs. The Joint Economic Committee put forward a study, I believe, the last couple of days, making the same point. And this morning, I heard that Alan Greenspan has a report coming out making the same point. Understand that if as a small business person, I looked up at Washington borrowing 40 cents out of every dollar they were spending, and I saw $14.2 trillion worth of debt. It would cause me to have real concerns about how much I was willing to reinvest in my business. I'd be sitting on my cash and sitting on my hands. There's no doubt in my mind that if we can get our fiscal house in order here in Washington, we can begin to reduce some of the uncertainty that's affecting employers and investors in our economy. Let's say thanks to all of you for participating in today's event.
Thanks.
I'll turn it back to Peter.
Just, audience, would you please join me in thanking our panelists for coming in today?
Good job. Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, you did great. You're natural.